In this week's episode, we're going to be discussing some of the crossroads you may cross when practicing quality deer management.
Mossy Oak Properties, where outdoorsmen find their favorite place.
Quality deer management. It's all the rage, is it not?
QDM. QDM.
Now, quality deer management is a philosophy that was introduced to me many moons ago.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. But I tell you what, once it was introduced to me, every ounce of me became a strong advocate of this philosophy.
Right. Yeah, same for me. I mean, it represents a very big part of you and I and who we are as wildlife managers, conservationists, hunters, and people, and how we view wildlife in the natural world. I go back, same thing for me. When I was first introduced to it, I became consumed by the philosophy, and that philosophy and organization influenced a lot of the decisions that I made when it comes to hunting in the outdoors.
Oh yeah, I mean, the philosophy and the organization that grabbed a hold of that philosophy and made it a whole entity. Yeah. I mean, I have to give credit to my success and my career to both.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
But back in the day, I mean, I was one of those guys where when we were talking about quality deer management, we were talking about shooting an adequate amount of does and pass up the young. And then it was pass up those 2-year-olds. Then it was pass up those 3-year-olds. And then it was pass up the 4-year-olds. Right. And then it was like, wait a minute. When's this stop?
Right.
You know, if you could go back in time, and I was one of those guys.
Yeah.
That we were preaching, we got caught up in this philosophy and maybe started making it into something that it wasn't intended to be.
I'm just as guilty of it as you. I could fill my wall with deer I should have shot when I was first got into QD, and especially where I grew up and where I was hunting. Well, it was a 3-year-old and it was a heck of a deer, but it wasn't a 4, which is what I was reading about in the magazines or seeing get shot on TV. And I could fill my wall with shoulda, woulda, couldas of deer that should be in my freezer, but are instead in somebody else's because they had sense enough to shoot what made them happy.
I know, and that's what we're talking about today. Quality deer management philosophy, the true art and science of this philosophy is not what it is today that you see on TV and the podcasts and stuff like that. It is still about shooting an adequate amount of does. It's all about creating quality habitat. And it still represents letting the young ones go so they can grow. Right. But that little line right there is where it gets tricky. Back in the day, once like we talked about, you know, hey, don't shoot those big ones or those little ones, excuse me. But today, it's a whole different time.
It is.
I wish I had this mentality like I do now back then. But that's what we're discussing. Trophy is in the eye of the beholder. The quality deer management philosophy is let them go so they can grow. Is it a 1.5 years? QDM.
Exactly.
Is it a 2.5? You shoot a 2, you still did quality deer management because you let it got another age. I'm simplifying.
Exactly. Yeah, QDM, it's a philosophy or a guideline. It's not a rule book. Like, there's not a rule book of QDM rules that say to let him go so he can grow. It has to be, like you mentioned, it has to be, you have to pass your 2-year-olds, you have to pass your 3-year-olds. Depending on where you're at in the country and what you value as a trophy deer, that is going to be entirely personal. It is entirely personal between you and I. It's entirely personal to your region, what you value as a hunter, your hunting experience, and what you get out of harvesting a deer.
Yeah. The conversations that I've had with family, you know, specifically like my brother and I hunt a lot. And, you know, back in the day, I was dismissing, you know, I wasn't hunting the way we should have been hunting, where trophy is in the eye of the beholder. So there's tension between that and there's friends that you kind of like, I would have gave them another year.
Right.
You know, what are you talking about? What are you doing? You're supposed to have fun with all this. There was a time where I got asked to be a keynote speaker at a QDM co-op. And they came rushing up to me and they said, Erich, hey, could you discuss with the co-op, you know, they're shooting 3-year-olds. Could you address this? And I was like, oh, I'm going to address this, all right. So I got up there and I lectured both sides. And to summarize the whole talk was, you've heard this many times, QDM is a ladder and the goal is the top of the roof, all right? And each one of us climbs that ladder a different aspect of it. Some people like to miss some rungs to get up there and want to shoot 4-year-olds. And then there's some people that climb halfway and get afraid of heights and like 2 or 3 is perfect.
Right.
Perfect for me.
Yeah.
I don't walk in your shoes, you don't walk in mine, you don't know my time, you don't know my financial resources, you don't know my wife. You don't know what my situation is. And shooting a 2-year-old and or 3-year-old is perfectly fine. It's still quality or management.
Yeah, as we've mentioned, it's all in what you value and the experience. And I can think of one hunt a handful of years ago where I was hunting on a buddy's piece of property in prime deer country in west central Illinois, where I was on a stand one morning. It was a beautiful fall morning, I think November 4th, and I saw a 3-year-old 130-inch buck 200 yards away. And it was a beautiful fall morning, and I was just like, hey, you know what? I'm gonna see what this deer will do. So I threw out a couple grunts at him. He lifted his head. I threw out a couple more, and he came in on a beeline faster than you could ever imagine, right on the string. And as he came in, and I knew the deer was 3, I knew there were bigger bucks on the farm than he was, but it was such a cool experience, especially coming from where I am in Virginia, to be able to grunt a deer. I can't even see 200 yards back home in the mountains, much less see a shooter buck 200 yards and call him in to 8 yards where I shot him at the base of the tree. As he was coming in, I knew his age, I knew there were bigger bucks, but there was such a cool experience, such a cool encounter to be able to interact with the animal that way and to read his body language, read his behavior, throw a couple soft grunts out to know what would bring him in. And yeah, he came in at 8 yards and I shot him, and it's one of the coolest hunts and one of the deer I'm most proud of to this day because of the experience, regardless of size or age.
Yeah, there's a lot of unneeded stress we put on ourselves, as well as family members, friends that are hunting with people that are doing true QDM. It is a stressful, you're putting a lot of stress on them. I am guilty #1 of putting stress on my family and friends. You know, I try to do my very best today.
Right.
Like, I know we were sending text messages the other day, like, hey, I got a 3-point in the food plot, and everyone's going, shoot them, you know, just having fun, you know. But yeah, it's one of those things you can make this not fun and very stressful, and that is not what QDM is about.
Yeah, QDM, this lifestyle, this philosophy, it's entirely personal, and it can be whatever you want it to be. A quality animal to me is different than a quality animal to you.
Much bigger.
You're not wrong. Which is different than a quality animal for whoever is watching. But the thing to remember with QDM is that it can help you achieve your goals. And your goals are different than mine, which are different than yours, which are different than yours. But no matter what your goals are, QDM is the vehicle that can help you accomplish them.
For sure. And one rule of thumb of everything that you can practice quality deer management when it comes to habitat, deer hunting, doe hunting, whatever, is don't get caught up in the noise. Do you. Do what you can with what you have where you are.
Mossy Oak Properties, where outdoorsmen find their favorite place.